This is a 2005 Toyota Sequoia, and we're going to replace the front brake pads. All the work on this vehicle has already been done. We've even turned the rotors. For those of you that don't know what turning rotors is, it's a process by which they actually remove a layer of metal off the rotor. I'll show you that as we get into this video. To start off, we want to jack up the vehicle, bring the wheel up a couple of inches off the ground, and have it stabilized by jack stands. The hubcap comes off first, and it usually has a notch. So you got to find that notch, use a flathead screwdriver, and pry it off. The lug nuts are actually 21 millimeter, so we're going to use an impact wrench in order to remove those. There's that. Now we'll simply pull off the front wheel and roll it out of the way. And now you can see the front brake calipers. Here's the actual rotor that we already turned. Turning gives this rotor a flat, smooth surface, pretty much like it was new. In this case, we had to do it because this is a 4x vehicle, and we had some hot spots on the rotor. I've got the key in the ignition, just to the accessory position, so I could actually turn everything here. The first thing we want to do is remove 3 clips. There are 2 on these actual pins, and then there's one right here. This spring, we just pull off from each brake pad side, and it'll lift up like so. Here's a closer view. We're going to remove this spring, pull it out of each hole from each side, just let it rest. Then there are a couple of springs that hold these pins in. I'm going to go ahead and pull those off. They just slide right out. Now before we actually remove the pins that hold the brake pads in, we're going to take the same flathead that we had. We're going to use it in order to compress the actual pistons away from the brake pads so that they'll slide out. Stick a screwdriver in there. Just press nice and easy, and you can see them actually moving. Now, since these brake pads are new, there's not going to be a whole lot of room to play with, but you may need to actually remove some brake fluid from the master cylinder. Now I'm going to pop the top pin out, and along with it comes the spring. Pop the bottom pin out, and at this point, with a little movement of the rotor, you can see how the brake pads are ready to come out. So they should just pull right out. Here's that. There are some shims that go in there. I put some brake quiet on the inside of them before actually putting them back in. These things just will fall right off. You want to clean those up before you put them back in. This side's the same way. And it's that simple. To replace them, go ahead and slide them back in. Get them aligned with the rotor. May have to move the rotor back and forth a little bit just to get that extra room in there. Actually place the pins back through and line everything up. Before you actually put the top pin all the way through, you'll need to replace that spring. There's that spring. Put it back in its place before the top pin goes through. And then we'll actually replace the 2 springs on the pins. And then we'll put the spring back in. I should say the ends of the spring back in the holes that are located on the brake pads themselves. Straighten the rotor out. Turn this back around. Get the wheel, align the rotor up with the holes on the wheel. Once it's seated, you should have about 3 to 4 millimeters of threading on each of the lugs. And we will hand screw the lug nuts back on just to make sure before we use any tools that we don't actually cross thread the threads. The torque on these is 120 foot-pounds, so it'd be good to actually get a torque wrench, or you can rent one at an auto parts store. Just going to center the wheel a little bit more and use the impact wrench ever so slightly to start tightening these up. When you tighten these back up, there is a specific star pattern you'll actually want to use. So you just want to pick one to start with. In this case, we start with the top, and we'll go directly across and then tighten the bottom. Then we'll actually go just to the left and skip one. So we'll start here, and then we'll go directly across. Then we'll do the same thing. We'll skip one, start here, go directly across, and then we're back into our pattern. Skip one, directly across, skip one, directly across, skip one, directly across, and so forth, until you get 120 foot-pounds with your torque wrench. Using a torque wrench is pretty simple. There's actual numbers in here for foot-pounds, and what you do is just lift up at the bottom, and you'll tighten this until you reach the specific foot-pounds that you're looking for. In this case, we're looking for 120. So I'm going to tighten that up and get ready to use it to tighten the lug nuts. I've actually lowered the vehicle off the jack stands. It's still on the jack, and it's not completely down on the ground just yet, just enough to where the wheel actually won't turn when we tighten it down. So again, I'm going to start in our star pattern at the top until you hear that click. That's what a torque wrench does. And then go in our star pattern. And we should be all set. Once everything's back together, before you actually move the vehicle, you're going to want to actually press the brake pedal quite a few times, just to put that brake fluid back in the lines and get those brake pads right up against the rotor like they should be. Then when you back out or move forward, you'll want to do it very slowly. Just make sure that the brake pads actually grab and then do a few tests at 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, and so forth. If you hear anything strange, it could very well be that you put something together wrong, so you might want to remove the wheel and check that out again.